standing outside of this, it does seem that fairies are coming more into people's consciousness in a bigger way at the moment, and also that people are coming forward to talk more openly about these things. Hello, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. And I'm really excited to welcome Mikayla and Tyson, who have a really exciting project called Fae Folk, A Search for Connection, which is a film. So welcome, Mikayla, welcome, Tyson.
Thanks, Claire. So excited to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so I can start with how Tyson and I got together. This has been truly a dream of mine for several decades. The first career I ever wanted was to travel the globe and search for fairies, essentially. And Tyson and I worked together about half a decade ago. And I, in some team event, had mentioned that this has been a lifelong dream of mine. And he reached out and was like, you should do that. You need to do that. And we set up some time, and he helped me think a little bit further about how to tackle it from a film perspective, which is not my area of expertise, but certainly is his. And it was the first time really that I had shared this interest of mine, and someone had been so excited, almost as excited as I was about it, and really jumped on board and gave me advice. And so I, of course, we ended up, going our separate ways from a work perspective. And I was laid off this spring, really serendipitously, and felt like it was time for the fairy show to come back, and reached out to Tyson and just let him know, hey, as I think I said, as fairy supporter number one, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about picking this project back up. And he said, well, funnily enough, I own my own production company now, so write up a proposal and let's chat about it. And we did. So our history really starts with some pretty cool work experience together, and then just he's been a fan of this even behind the scenes when I haven't really been working on it for the past half a decade.
So how did this start for you, Mikayla, the seeds of this project?
It's really hard to actually pinpoint how it came about. I've always been really intrigued by fairies, and you will hear me say from an early age, I really wanted like a quote unquote fairy friend, a house fairy who would, hang out with me, and would, I always pictured like hanging out in the braids of my hair, right? And just kind of a fairy as a companion. And as time went on, I started getting deep into some of the literature that exists from a historical, but also an encounter perspective. And I started learning more and more about the dark side of fairies. And as I was doing that, I had kind of conceived this career for myself because I was just so passionate about having this beautiful experience with the Fae. And so I thought, okay, well, I really want to find a fairy. Why don't I travel the globe and make that my journey? But I also got really excited about the idea of taking others along with me and sharing the magic there. And so I was probably 15 when I decided that's what I wanted my job to be. And it's one of those things that, especially in the US, we don't, there comes an age where you get to a point where it's no longer okay to talk about these things as real goals, right? It's like, oh, that's a cute hobby. Put it back in your imagination where it belongs. And I didn't get any of that directly from family or friends, but I just felt that social pressure and societal pressure. And so it's something I just I kept putting, in the back burner, really, and between school and work and work and work and work and school again, and every transition, it's something that's always kind of popped back up into mind. And I've had to, quiet it back and say, no, 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 time to change careers. No, time to get my master's. No, time to do this thing that the world expects me to do. When really I've read fairy literature throughout that time. I've done fairy art. I've worked with people who can communicate with fairies and picked their brain. Like, it's not a passion that went away. It's just I felt like it was something I had to kind of push behind me. And so I'm really glad that this spring I was just getting all the signs that no, now is the time. We actually have to do this, because it feels like it's so much bigger than the original thought of just, I love fairies, I want to immerse myself in fairies. It feels like now we're at a kind of an important place for the world where, one, we could really use some magic with some of the tricky, sad, tough things going on, and more importantly, maybe, is this idea of connection, which is in the title, because I feel like lately I've been more and more connected to devices and a cityscape, and want to kind of mix up the wires and find that reconnection to nature, reconnection to others, and especially this community that I've wanted to be a part of for so long, but felt like it was silly, or it just felt like it was getting pushed down from other angles. So yeah, I've loved fairies forever, and really it was just that love for fairies kind of sparked me wanting to make it into my everything, into my world, and then life kind of got in the way.
That's such a cool job title to have, isn't it? That you
Fairy
really,
finder.
fairy finder. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. So how did the idea of this film start? I mean, what was the start?
It's a good question. It initially arose simply from, how can I turn this thing that I love and am like borderline obsessed with? Maybe we could say fully obsessed with. That's probably true of me as a child, if you want to picture that. I think I was actually Tinkerbell for like 7 years in a row, so we can say obsessed. So initially it was, how can I turn all of this work I've done to try to, figure out how I can have these connections as a child? How can I turn that into more of my world? Well, kids grow up and we get adults, or we get to be adults and adults get jobs. So, okay, how can I make this my job? Because this is all I care about, is really what it started out as. And then even when I met Tyson half a decade ago, the idea was really more of a travel show of, let's go to different countries around the world and talk about the places associated with fairies, the lore and how it relates, and have connection that way of, oh, look at these similarities. It's interesting that these cultures so far apart can have such similar ideas. I think there's beauty and magic in that too. And Tyson will tell you, after I gave him my 15-page proposal
It was a lot.
This year, we and it's morphed a ton even since then, but we really thought, okay, what's going to feel good? This is essentially something that has been such a huge part of my life for so long. It outdates, friendships. I haven't had friends this long. I haven't had a career this long. It's one of the longest things I've had in my life. So it's changed a lot, and so Tyson and I sorry, I totally lost my thread there. But so when Tyson and I chatted, we were talking about it kind of as the show still, and then it. Oh, this is where I was going. So it's it's something that it's been such a huge part of my life that it's actually become what I like to call my like deathbed regret. If I don't do this, this will be the thing that I regret. And it's not the doing, I suppose, it's the trying. If this has been something that's been on my mind that I've cared about so deeply for so long, if I don't even try to share this with the world, that's the one thing I know that I will regret, because I'm very happy with the ways I treat people and the ways I treat the environment and everything else in my life. That's my one thing. So when Tyson and I chatted, we thought about that and what form this should take to best carry that out. And so that's when it switched into this feature film and something that could be standalone, where we could put it out and the world could see it and we could say, yes, we did it, we tried, that's the thing. And, you know, hopefully more comes from it, absolutely. But we're putting all of our effort into this one thing to make it great. And there are so many pieces of inspiration for me. The disconnection I was feeling from the environment, the fear and anxiety I have when I think about this planet, feeling, you know, like I've been alone and I've had to shut this down my whole life. And in just starting this project and talking about it and seeing how insanely excited everyone is to talk about fairies, we've kind of come to this realization that, like, oh my gosh, has everyone just wanted to talk about fairies but has felt like they can't this whole time? Like, we part of the reason the title is Fae Folk, and thanks to Tyson for his brilliance on this, is not only are we talking about Fae Folk as in the fairies, but also the community of people who are interested in and engaged in fairy lore and or fairy healing or something having to do with the Fae. So it really became this one big piece of connection. And if we're seeing all these people who are so excited to talk about it, we need to get the idea out there that these beliefs are valued. And we want to contribute to that space, Claire, that you live in so beautifully, of creating a safe space for people who believe whatever they believe. The goal is not to have anyone believe one certain thing, but the idea is to let people know that it's okay to believe what you believe as long as it's not hurting people. That's an important disclaimer we like to put in, and to help create that space and to help preserve some of this culture. So that's a really long-winded response of kind of how it's morphed, and Tyson is normally better at this. So Tyson, please jump in and add any other thoughts.
I guess, Claire, I should just say you should feel more than welcome to edit any of this down if you need to.
Please, yes, I absolutely.
But I mean, look at that enthusiasm. That's sort of that's why we're doing it, you know?
Yeah,
because that
yeah,
passion
it's
is
great.
real. Other people
Yeah.
have that. Just to back up a little bit, yeah, she sent me an initial pitch that was about 12 pages long. It had 6 countries on it. I think it's amazing, but basically what I said was, you've been wanting to do this for 20 years now. Let's do something we can actually accomplish. Let's like take the first step and make something, knowing that we can't scratch the surface yet, but that none of these ideas that we won't get to cover are gone. They're not out of the realm. It's just try and make something. And so we landed on Ireland because, well, as you know, there's a lot of great stuff in Ireland that relate to fairies. So we're gonna make a film that we hope jumpstarts something bigger, because there's a lot to talk about, and the scope has crept quite a bit since we started talking. To follow up on Mikayla saying she's been surprised by how much people have been wanting to do this. We have spoken to so many experts, and I will tell you, every single time I am amazed that, one, they want to be a part of this, and two, they want to help us make it. It's kind of been amazing. And if you believe in magic or fate or any of that, like, it's sort of all the stars kind of aligned, and all of these people we wanted to talk to said, I can do October. It's really soon in terms of production. It is not a lot of time. I would normally call us crazy, but it all sort of aligned. So we're gonna try it.
Yeah, it's I'm just so excited to be involved in this and to help in whatever way I can. And that's great that it's so supported. And just to go back to what Mikayla was saying about your path, I think we said before, we've got very similar paths with this, haven't we? Because like you, I've sort of found a connection with fairies and then gone off and done various careers, come back to it. It's always been alongside my day job, but now it's kind of taking me somewhere else. So it really feels like a ripe time. So it just feels like fairies are, well, I suppose from my perspective, but I'm immersed in it. So I suppose I'm not standing outside of this. It does seem that fairies are coming more into people's consciousness in a bigger way at the moment. And also that people are coming forward to talk more openly about these things. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed that
Yeah.
sort of trend?
Definitely. I think someone said it well, and it might have been Joe actually, that fairies are having a moment. And I think perhaps that's part of why this journey has been so, I'll use the word easy. Certainly, it's taken a lot of research and logistics and coordination, but like Tyson was saying, it's the universe has really been working with us on this. Everyone's really excited to be involved. People have been incredibly generous and open and kind and sharing, and it's things are falling into place in a way that's makes me think that yeah, fairies are totally having a moment. And it is really interesting. I'm not sure if it's people are just ready for this right now because there's so many negative things to focus on in the world. This feels really exciting and almost like a little bit of escapism, or it's drawing people to find more connections with nature, with the universe, with the other. I'm not sure exactly, but I can certainly tell you that I have been shocked on a number of occasions of just people wanting to talk about fairies in a way that makes me think, did I just never ask anyone before? Because even I'm going and getting my hair cut, and my hairdresser told me that he wrote a Wikipedia article on fairies a decade and a half ago. Or I'm sitting at my aunt's birthday party, and the person next to me is like, oh, have you been to this place? There are tons of fairy houses. You have to go here. And here I'm going to share this podcast, and here I'm going to share this article. And just people are so excited. So I think you're absolutely right. I think people there, and in film even too, when Tyson and I first met, the night before, he had gone to theaters and saw a movie about fairies that he had no idea was going to be about fairies, and it's a horror film that just came out, right? And there's another really big film coming up at the end of the year that's going to be about fairies. And so from a film perspective, certainly fairies are having a moment. I think from perhaps like a paranormal, supernatural, academic perspective, we're even seeing that fairies are having a moment. And certainly people seem like they want to talk about fairies. So from an openness perspective, and then from a connection perspective, and Claire, I know you have a better sense here than I do, but I really feel like I've encountered so many people who are really opening themselves to fairy connections, either through beautiful courses like yours that help deepen that connection, through meditation, through other skills they have, like through Reiki or other healing methods too. And it is fairies are certainly, in my mind at least, having a moment, which makes me very happy.
And I'd love to hear about some of the locations you're thinking of going to. Can you talk about that? both perhaps
Absolutely.
Tyson and Mikayla share some of the places that you're interested in filming in, and yeah, that'd be great.
Mikayla has the master list and is mapping this whole thing out in coordination with our experts, so I'll let her take it.
Okay.
And I was going to say, this is probably what Tyson is referring to when he talks about scope creep, because there are just so many incredible places in Ireland that either have, fairy ecology. There are so many fairy forts, fairy rings, that are sacred spaces for other reasons, that also are highly associated with fairies. You have places like Newgrange or Ben Bulben, which is high on our list of places to go. You have the Burren, you have the Gap of Dunlow. So we're really excited because we're going to some of these places, some of maybe like the lesser known places that, and where we also want to, there are a couple of places we're going that are specifically related to stories of encounters that people have had in the last century or a couple of decades, and they hold really meaningful spaces for specific communities or specific families. And so those are more of the locations that we want to be really careful with, because we don't want to disrupt the communities or those people's lives in those spaces. But they will be balanced in with some of those spaces like Knockmahill and in the Gap of Dunlow is one we're really excited about. Wishing Bridges, Wishing Chair, or Fairy Bridges and Wishing Chair. So there are a lot, and I likely still have to cut out a couple in light of some of the information we've gathered this past week on just more local encounters. But certainly people can get excited about caves and cliffs and hills and gaps as potential really beautiful, stunning places around Ireland they can expect to see us.
As well as a number of small towns around along the way. The idea is to speak to the people of those places and ask them what fairies mean to them, or how they've been a part of their life, be it literal or just in the culture.
Totally.
Sorry, just turn my mic back on. So you have a campaign to support the film. So perhaps Tyson, or who wants to talk about that?
So as I sort of hinted at earlier, this started as a adventure to let Mikayla explore her dream and to shed some light on the Fae. And we started talking to experts, if anything, just for advice. We were just like, where should we travel to? Where should we go? If we took 2 weeks through, me, Mikayla, and a director, where would we go? And then all of the experts started saying things like, well, we'd come with you, or we could come with you. And we're like, oh, well, that's way more interesting. Let's take the experts to the places they write about and see what that makes them feel, right? And before long, we had 8 experts adding on to our initial crew of 3. And so I want to make one thing very clear. We're going no matter what. We're making it happen. We have a plan. But we realize that if we really want to do it right and make everyone as comfortable as we can, we should see if we can get the community to help us out a little bit. It seems like this is something people want to see, at least in the communities we've spoken to. And I think it could really open the door to a lot more of this if we can do this one right. So we set up an Indiegogo. We did kind of a soft launch over the weekend just to send it to people and kind of test the waters a little bit on, like, did you catch any typos, for instance, things of that nature. So far, none. So feel good about that. But We'll do a more thorough push for it. I think probably starting tomorrow, we're going to make a little pitch video for it. But there's some interesting perks in there. Credits on IMDb, you'll name in the actual credits of the film. Depending on how high up you go, you get, BTS photos, digital art prints of the poster, which we can't talk about yet, but we do have someone lined up who I think people could be very excited about. All the way up to like views on rough cuts and things of that nature, which to someone who might be interested in the filmmaking side of this could be really interesting to see kind of how we build and we go through this process, as well as daily updates on the production. I'm going to be taking pictures of all of these famous people, whether they are happy about that or not. So that'll be fun for fans. But yeah, I guess we would love any help we can get.
Yeah, please support however you can, because this is, I can see more coming of this as well. I mean, why shouldn't it be like a series on Netflix? There
I
needs
like
to
where
be,
your head's at.
yeah, there needs to be more fairies, I think, because for so long, fairies and fairy experiences seem to be less taken seriously than like Sasquatch or ghosts. I mean, there's so many podcasts and TV shows about Sasquatch and cryptids and hauntings, UFOs, but fairies, I mean, you look on Netflix or so most of the mainstream kind of streaming services, and there's hardly anything.
Mhm.
Even on, I have a Gaia subscription, even on there, there's minimal. And you think something like that, the sort of spiritually based. So there needs to be more, definitely. I mean, like you say, there's the film coming out, isn't there, at the end of the year? It's called Bad Fairies. Is that the one you were talking about?
She was
The
talking about Fern Gully.
Oh, Fern Gully.
I
Ah, I
don't know
haven't
about
heard
Bad
about that
Fairy.
one. Bad Fairies. Yeah, it's going to be an animation, and it's made by the animator is the animator for Centaur World, which I've just started watching recently, which is on Netflix. It's a really cool, really funny animation, which is sort of aimed at children, but it's also funny for adults.
That's awesome. Yeah, so there you go. There's more of a
Yeah,
fairy moment we didn't even
yeah,
know about yet.
yeah. So, Mikayla, I'd love to know about any of your fairy inspiration, um, any areas of fairy folklore that you've been drawn to, or experiences that you've heard about from people. If you've got any sort of stories you could share, that'd be great.
Sure. So the first it's funny because we were trying to trace back, when talking to the fabulous team at Subjective, like really what sparked this? Where did this come from? Surely more than just being a child around the woods. And the first fairy book I very distinctly remember reading was Fairies A to Z, which is this gorgeous illustrated book. That's really it's a picture book designed for children, and in the back there's a little sleeve that you can pull out and put together a little fairy house. And I wonder if maybe that got me really excited to take that leap from reading and being really intrigued by the pictures to actually putting that in nature and striving for a connection. The one of the just wow books for me was reading, well, I've had a couple of those moments, I suppose, but the first one was reading Janet Board's book, where it's just encounter after encounter after encounter, and it was so eye-opening for me, who I had not had any fairy encounters, despite my very strong efforts, and perhaps the fairies were like, you're trying it a little too hard, girlfriend, back off. I had not had any experiences, and then to read so many of these experiences that are really well documented and paint fairies in such different lights, that was the first time where I really learned about all the different types of fairies and how they interact, and the space that fairies can hold between dark, light, gray, you know, kind of the fear of fairies, how especially in Irish culture, it's actually best if we avoid the fairies. Like a lot of our lives and what we're doing is to try to not get near fairies. And this is one of the reasons I actually put the project on pause so many times, is because I just was like, I don't want to go blind. I don't want to die. Like there's some real fear that, you know, if you do this wrong, if the intentions aren't right, can arise. So that book for me was really, really impactful, and it presented this idea of fairies living alongside us, but in a different dimension, which is something that I hadn't encountered yet, and an idea I really liked. And then reading more personal stories like Dora Van Gelder, and just how there are wonderful, amazing people who fairies are a part of their everyday lives in a very real, tangible way to them, that I hadn't experienced. And so to me, that was another layer of, oh wow, this is really cool. There are people who go to the ocean and they can see all the fairies swimming around in the waves. And wow, how would this world be different if we could all have that experience? How would we treat it differently? How would we treat each other differently? And that's something that I've really appreciated about fairies and fairy culture, is this concept of fairies and the environment are one. And there is something so special in thinking about, what if it is not just us? Like, are we doing right by the other beings who share this planet with us? Animals as well, of course, too. But are we doing right by everyone else with how we're treating this planet and how we're going about our daily lives? And so a lot of the earlier inspiration, and I am guilty too of going through the Tinkerbell phase. I wore wings a lot, like a lot. And so yeah, I think like initially it was just this idea of I want a friend, and then it was every single piece I've read since then has sparked something new. Like even the wonderful folks who are coming along with us, you know, Richard Suggs' book on fairies is like, oh, again, mind-boggling. Looking at Jack Hunter's work and how the ecology ties to the paranormal. Wow, mind blown. Like listening to the encounters on your podcast, listening to the encounters on Joe's podcast, listening to some of the incredible stories that people like Michael Fortune have documented, like getting immersed in what exists, and going through some of these courses like you have to open that connection have been really impactful. And to kind of switch over to the connection piece, like candidly, that's something I'm still really striving for. And I think within me, I'm kind of a weird person where I am really open to the other and as a concept, and like really excited about that engagement, but I'm also deeply afraid of things that that I can't control, which, you know, we don't have to get into my trauma to figure out why. But so there is like a 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out kind of way that I think I generally approach these connections. And most of my fairy connections have, as I define them, which look pretty different, I know, from how many define, is through my meditations. And I think here's where we have a little bit of overlap too, is you know, I about 2 years ago at this point started attending women's circles locally, led by this amazing woman who holds cacao ceremonies. And after a couple months of doing those, I started having vision. I don't love the word visions, but I don't know what else to use in that place of I just started seeing beautiful, crazy things happening in my head, and I cannot discern messages from them. I don't know what's happening, but it's like a beautiful movie playing, and I am totally along for the ride. And I will jot down those images as they come up, and I keep them in my little notebook. And many of those over the past couple of years have been fairy related, and they are nowhere near the level of art that you come out with, Claire. They are really like, I'm drawing with my eyes closed, stick figure type drawings, but many of them I have had several images involving fairies over the past forever. One even I'm looking at here, I'll do a quick flash, but I really don't want you to look at it because it's terrible. But you know, it's me, and I was like, is this in the Scottish Highlands? Is this Ireland? Question mark. I'm standing on a cliff in a field. I can send you a picture later too, but definitely don't show this to people. It is atrocious. But there were just, you know, there was a harp or a green copper flute. There was music involved, and there were just a couple fairies around, and we were on a cliff, and there was water, and it was just, you know, me from behind. Like, I don't get anything more than that, but I always enjoy those moments when they arise in my meditations. And I would say that is my closest encounter to fairies. And I could truly talk to you for 27 years about all the incredible encounters that I've heard from others over the course of this research. And hopefully some of those will beautifully come to light in the movie itself. But yeah.
That's so interesting. So your research, is that mostly in the States? Have you spoken to people worldwide? Yeah, how have you gone about collecting the research that you've collated? So that sounds like it could be a book.
I'm not quite sure. And I don't think I'm doing it as well as you or say Joe, for example. I found it to be really tricky. And honestly, another one of the barriers to doing something like this earlier, it is really, it's not always easy to get someone to speak about their encounters. Oftentimes you already have to kind of be known as someone who creates that space like you do, and then, you know, the people start to come to you and share those more. So a lot of the stories of encounters we've gotten are through the wonderful experts or people we've chatted with online who say, oh, you absolutely have to talk to this person. Let me connect the two of you, or oh, I just heard this thing related to that. Let me get with them and see if they're comfortable sharing. So a lot of this information is coming to us from friends and contacts, because, which I love. I think that's the way I feel more comfortable doing it. I would love to hear a million, gazillion, bajillion stories. And I know that my heart and intentions are in the right place, but in a world where, you know, people don't always feel like they can share these things honestly, and don't know, you know, if they'll be made to feel ridiculous, it's not always easy to share that with a stranger, especially someone who might not live in the same country as you. I will say most of the stories that we have are not from the US or even Canada, which are the two places that I lay claim to, I suppose. So it is, I'm finding those areas where there are stories from grandparents or traditions that are still held, and or there's a really deep connection to nature. That's where I'm hearing more stories. And when I am seeing when I am hearing of encounters in the United States or in Canada, it's always in nature. It's always oh, this was a surprise. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I was out in nature and this thing happened. I was playing music or I was meditating or a lot of the two things. People just find themselves open to it. Or I know Jo talks about this a lot in her podcast. They're going through some sort of transition stage. I do feel like that I'm hearing a lot of, or it's around dusk or dawn or the equinox, one of those between times where we hear fairies coming through.
Yeah, and thank you for explaining that so wonderfully, Mikayla. It's really fascinating, isn't it? How these stories seem to be just, I mean, I'm always surprised that just when I think, oh, wonder if I should sort of put a shout out for guests, there's always someone that comes forward to share a story with me. I've got nearly 60 episodes now. When I started, I was just like, oh, maybe I'll have, 5.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's really good, like you say, that people have spaces to share these experiences with fairies because, as I was saying, there's lots of outlets for if you've had a Sasquatch experience or seen a ghost or a UFO, but there's so few spaces online or out there worldwide where people can express these stories these days. 100 years ago, maybe not 100 years ago, longer ago than that, these were just stories that people exchanged around campfires or in front of the hearth in the evening. And it was just commonplace, wasn't it? Stories were swapped around. But nowadays, it seems to be that there are lots of people out there. There's more people. There's thousands more people than I know about, or that we know about, that have experiences. But it's just reaching those people. So that's what's so exciting about this film, is that it's going to reach a wider audience and just bring fairies into people's awareness that these are real experiences that people are having. This is living folklore. The folklore is really important, and it's not something of the past. Yeah. Tyson, I'd love to know about any ideas that you have, or about fairy experiences, or what your interest is in the sort of otherworldly. Do you have an interest in
So
the other? Yeah.
yes, very much, but it's slightly it's like adjacent, not exactly the same. So I have always been fascinated with monsters, just the other, as Mikayla likes to call it. I honestly didn't know hardly anything about the Fae until Mikayla brought it back up, and then I started reading books, and I was like, oh, this is actually right up my alley. But my big thing is I just want to tell interesting, unique stories that people haven't heard before. And I started this tiny little production company based purely on the passion to do something that was decidedly not corporate. Like, we named our first movie something that everyone told us we couldn't, and it was partly because they told me I couldn't. So, like, we're just trying to do something different that isn't the Disneys or anything else. So what really interests me is you find someone who's this passionate about something, you're gonna find something interesting at the end of that. And it does not hurt that Ireland is gorgeous. So when it comes to where you're going to point your camera, I can think of very few better places. Um, so yeah, I've always, like, I've read a lot of mythology and things in the past, and I have shelves of monster films and monster books and creatures and things of that nature. And it's always been it's this shouldn't become a therapy appointment, but it's like it's sort of like representative of yourself. If you feel like you're kind of the outcast growing up, you're different. You kind of latch on to the other, who are sometimes the heroes of the story, or at the very least, the most interesting part of it. So yeah, I mean, fairies just kind of fall into that in an interesting way, not just in terms of what I'm interested in, but also just what we're trying to make in the world, like what the company's trying to do.
And if I may say, Tyson has become quite the fairy connoisseur. I think that you should earn an honorary degree for the amount of fairy books that you have worked your way through over the past handful of months, my friend.
Well, it was really important. And sorry, Claire, it looked like you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No, I was just interested in the books that you've read.
Yeah.
Say.
Well, it was important to me that Mikayla couldn't be the only one there who was at least aware of the basics. You know what I mean? I don't want to just go over there and start filming and asking people questions and just be a fly on the wall. I'm trying to immerse myself into it as much as possible and really be able to open up to all of the experiences that the people who are so knowledgeable in it are having. Um, so as for books, obviously Richard Suggs' book, the blue one, Mikayla, I can never remember the name of it. That one, read that one. Oh, there it's
Fairy
going away.
tale.
Yes.
Fairy magic is another one that you have.
Yes. This one is one that was recommended, I think, by Richard, maybe. Passport to and I'm how do you say Magonia? From Folklore to Flying Saucers. So it's just I haven't got to start this one yet, but this is on my shelf next to me because it's the one I'm diving into next.
Yeah, that's a great book. I've just got one of his other books, which is more about UFOs, but it's got a bit of fairy stuff in it. So I think it's just a bit of a remix of that book.
Yeah, there's another one, Entangled Life. I started and haven't finished. It's mostly about ecology. But we started going really down the line of how fairies are so intertwined into the environment and the world, and so that was recommended as a way to kind of look at some of the plants and the ecology in the same way we were looking at fairies.
Yeah, because it's a big theme, isn't it? That's coming through from so many people that I've spoken to, my own experience, and other people that I come across online that are saying that their interactions with fairies very much have this message of you need to look after the environment, you need to look after the world because it impacts on us as well, even though we don't really know where they come from, but they're kind of in between this world and the next, aren't they? Their world and our world. So they seem to be able to phase in and out of our reality in a very similar way as UFOs and other creatures like the Sasquatch. But all of them seem to have that message that you need to look after the planet. And yeah, so there's that theme in your film as well, isn't it? It's not just about finding fairies, it's also about that message of nature connection and the importance of the environment as well.
Yes,
Yep.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. We're not actually trying to find fairies. That would be amazing. But there's no like this is not finding Bigfoot. We're not, going to go camp out and like hope to spot one. The point is there are people who believe this. There are people this is very meaningful to. We're going to capture that and be surrounded by that feeling and nature. And that's the point. Less so proving to you they're there or not.
And the nature connection is so huge because as Michael Fortune actually recently said to me, these fairy forts, these fairy circles, they are nature. They are parts of nature, and as long as those things continue to exist, the fairy culture will hold true, because these will always be associated with fairies because they are now. And so there is this really interesting connection with fairies just to the natural landscape of the world, as well as these historical places, of course. And then, so many of these places too, we see the fairies, especially in Ireland, as the guardian, as the custodian of that land, or the steward of the environment, where it might be their role to make sure that humans are not littering, that there are not too many people in one space at one time, that it comes back to this concept that, oh, I hope I'm right when I think Yeats said this, of fairies are good to the good and evil to the evil. This concept of, if we are treating the natural world well, then that's when you see the stories of wishes being granted, or the cow that never runs dry of milk as a gift, or the horse that will travel between the fairy realm and your world because you've done us a favor. It's this concept of being good, and that includes to nature, that is so prevalent in so many of these tales, and I think in a beautiful way really encourages us to think about our interactions with nature. But on the other hand, it feels like there's so much responsibility in the minds of the Fae to protect that space as well, at all costs sometimes, that it is, you can't talk about fairies without talking about the natural world. And it is interesting to see how that, you zoom down the future, and like you're saying, there are more people having connections, and I think there will always be those landmarks as well, especially in Ireland, when there's natural formations, that this is a fairy ring, and that will continue to be a fairy ring, and we'll continue our traditions surrounding, like the hawthorn tree, for example. Some of these things will continue to be passed on, regardless of people's thoughts, that they're just so ingrained in the culture, that you can't talk about fairies without talking about nature.
Yeah, a really important message. And also like you were saying, about bringing the magic back to people. I think there's more awareness of that, especially in the last 5 years, through some of the world events that we've gone through and are still going through. So yeah, it's a really wonderful project. I'm really excited, as I said at the beginning, really excited to be part of it. And I'd love you to share where people can find you and connect with you, and so that they can get involved in the film in some way.
Amazing. Well, we've just started an Instagram for the film. I believe it's Fae Folk Film. You can find it there. But the primary source would be Subjective Movies on Instagram. Subjectivemovies.com. You can also find it there. And then Mikayla's Instagram is an always interesting look into her brain. She's often promoting the movie. And then most importantly, I would say the Indiegogo, which we will, unfortunately, Indiegogo links are a bit unruly, so we will put it in the chat or in the description, as you said, so people can find it. But honestly, it's we're trying to make something bigger than ourselves, and so we're looking for anyone who wants to be a part of that. We would love the help, and any amount they can help out.
Thank you both for coming on today. It's been really lovely to chat with you and hear more about the film, and hear both of your passion about it, about the project. And yeah, really wishing you a huge amount of luck and support. And I think I was thinking about what you were saying about, sorry, just a message popping up, just close that. I was just thinking about what you were saying about wanting the fairies to be on your side. So I think we spoke about this a little bit before when I spoke to you first time. And for me, it's all about intention and setting an intention. And your intention for the film is very heart-centered. And that's what, in my mind anyway, in my experience, that fairies are attracted to, that heart-centered purpose. So I don't think you've got anything to worry about as long as you're respecting their places, you're giving your intention about what you're going to do. They know what's the intention of the film is, and I'm sure you'll be welcomed to Ireland. I'm excited to be
Really appreciate that. We do intend to ask for permission before Mikayla's got it all planned out. Hopefully we'll get permission to go into any of the fairy territory that maybe would be questionable.
I'm sure you will, and you'll feel it. You'll feel it that you're not supposed to be there.
Well, thank you too. Thank you so much for being on, and thank you for being a part of the project. And for anyone who didn't catch it, Claire's actually going to join us in the movie.
Yeah.
She's not just helping from the outside. She's going to be in the movie.
Yeah, I'm so excited. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I've never been in a movie.
We are over the moon to have you involved. We are really, really excited and can't wait to, meet you in person. It's been great connecting online, but we're excited to meet in real life too and go on a little adventure with you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that, hanging out with you. So,
Cool.
Right, well, I'll say goodbye now. So if we say goodbye now, and then I'll stop recording and say goodbye properly. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
So lovely to have you on, Tyson, Mikayla. Thank you. And goodbye. Have a lovely evening or lovely day.
Thank you.
Okay.